Well, we faced a democracy crisis when the President of the United States called Georgia's Secretary of State on January 2nd and told him to, quote, find 11,780 votes. We survived that crisis because the Georgia Secretary of State refused to lie about the vote count and change the vote count so that Donald Trump could win the state of Georgia instead of Joe Biden. Republicans in Georgia do not want that to happen again. And so they have removed the Secretary of State from the position of authority in the aftermath of an election, and they have moved Georgia closer to the possibility of cheating the vote count next time Donald Trump calls and asks them to do that. And Georgia's not the only state that is trying to make it easier for Donald Trump to call and tell them how many votes he needs to win an election. Our first guest tonight, Ari Berman, has studied the new election laws passed by Republican state legislatures this year and says, quote, these bills are part of the greatest assault on voting rights since the end of Reconstruction, and they raise the likelihood of a nightmare scenario where GOP-controlled state legislatures use their increased power to override a Democratic victory in 2024 or persuade Republicans in Congress, if they regain power in 2022, to do the same. Republicans are trying to make it more difficult to vote in areas where Democratic turnout is strong. Democrats have fought that kind of voter suppression in the past, but they have never had to fight Republican attempts to change what happens after people vote. The Washington Post calls that the most dangerous thing that Republican legislatures are doing now. The Washington Post reports potentially most dangerous legislatures are giving themselves the right to interfere in vote counting and election disputes while tying the hands of secretaries of state to rule impartially, or even in some cases to seek legal advice. Bills giving legislators more oversight of elections, allowing them to interfere in the running of elections, and otherwise injecting partisanship into the process already have passed in Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Montana, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Texas. This is the most important story about American government in our lifetimes. Republicans are trying to change the nature of government in America. They are trying to eliminate democracy in states where they fear accurate vote counts. A new report from 3 voting rights groups warns, quote, the commitment of many state legislatures to attacking the foundations of our democracy appears to have deepened. The trend toward threatening election administrators with criminal penalties is more pronounced and aggressive, and attempts by legislatures to perform core election functions has grown more brazen. Many election officials around the country have faced death threats. An email sent to election officials in Georgia said, quote, no one at these places will be spared unless and until Trump is guaranteed to be POTUS again. Many election officials are quitting their now dangerous jobs. The Associated Press reports it is clear that many have recently left because of the newfound partisan rancor around the jobs and the threats many local election workers faced leading up to the November election and afterward, as former President Donald Trump and his allies challenged the results. Many of the people seeking those jobs now do not believe in democracy. The Associated Press reports the local election jobs are being vacated as Trump's false claims of fraud persist within the GOP and provide a platform for his loyalists to launch campaigns to become top election officials in several swing states. That report from voting rights groups says the 2021 state legislative season may ultimately prove to be a turning point in the history of America's democracy. These are the ingredients for a democracy crisis.